All right, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us, the Johns Hopkins School of Education Application Q&A virtual webinar today. Today you'll have the opportunity to hear directly from the Director of Admissions, Liz Woodward. Liz will be providing valuable application advice and answering questions that you might have about the application process. So thank you again for your time. We are very thrilled to present to you today. Before we get started, I would like to cover a few housekeeping topics. First, today's webinar is being recorded. We will be able to share a link with you after the event is complete. We welcome you to revisit the content yourself and share it with your colleagues or friends who might be interested. Also, please take a second to see if your mic is on mute right now. Please have your mic on mute at all times during the presentation. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please type your questions in the chat box and Liz and I will read and answer your questions.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Liz Woodward, as Sion had introduced me. I just very excited to see so many names registered and participating today. Some of you I see have also attended our just past March 16th open house. So it's a real positive sign that you are actively thinking and working on your applications. So we're very pleased to have you here today. This is really, as Sion had mentioned, a brief session to touch base with you regarding not only the kind of nuts and bolts of the application process, timelines, requirements, materials, really ways in which you can think kind of strategically about how to strengthen your application and how to avoid some of the pitfalls of the application process that we find frequently students ask questions about, and just so that you have a smooth, efficient process. In addition, we also have added some components here so you can kind of see once your application is completed, where it goes, what the timeline looks like, how you're notified by decisions. I want to thank a number of our participants today who responded to our request for advanced questions. I will try to address those as we go over each topical area. However, for anyone who didn't have a chance to do that, as Sion had mentioned, please type in your questions in the text box. We will be announcing those and then providing answers. And these are broad-based categories, so we ask that you, if it's personal or specific to your situation, we'll be happy to follow up with you afterwards so that we can answer directly any questions you may have. Okay, so let's get started. So the agenda is certainly to meet your presenters. So Sion, would you like to tell them a little bit about your background? Because I think it would help people put into context that you've kind of been through this. So.
So good afternoon, everyone, again. My name is Sion John. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions. And I'm also proud to share that I am a very proud graduate here at the School of Education. And now I'm going to turn it back to Liz Woodward. Again, she's the Director of Admissions.
So hi, everyone. This is Liz, and I've been part of the admissions team here at the Johns Hopkins School of Education since October 2016. I've worked in higher education since 2006 and exclusively in graduate admissions in the areas of arts, sciences, humanities, and of course education for the past 10 years. So this is one of my favorite part of my jobs is dialoguing with applicants and starting to get to know your stories and where you are at in the process. So this is a part of what I like to do best. So we will jump into the presentation. Many of you are in different stages of the application process. Some of you are further along. I see many of you have started your apps, but for those of you who are still on the fence about doing so, I try to think when I develop these presentations back to when I was first applying to a master's degree and what was going through my head and what I would have liked to have known then that I did not have the information for. And one of the most important aspects, I think, is to research, web, any materials that you can get, make sure all your key questions are answered about whether this is right fit for you. It's not only that we're looking for folks with academic ability, that's a big part of it, but it's also your commitment to the field, your fit with the program and for the School of Education. and both what you will gain and what you will contribute to your field of study. And you should really have a good idea of that before you submit your application. But if you're not, is really to reflect carefully on what you're doing, because it's a commitment. I also see many of you, as I had mentioned, have attended one of our events. I will tell you that more and more our faculty reviewers and our committees are asking me for data for people who have attended events like our open house or have come to a live webinar. So, that's positive evidence that, folks are getting information and showing active interest. Also ask for clarification. That's what you're all here doing today, which is great. And certainly creating that timeline and checklist. And I think one of the biggest questions we're going to get to later in the presentation, it revolves around deadlines and timing. So we will address that. Going to go through very briefly, because the majority of this session is designed for you to come through with things that are unclear that you're reading or not getting a clear sense of. So we're going to leave as much time as possible for the questions that you have. But I'm going to run through the major components. These are the basic components across every application in the School of Education. We have our online application system. You can log in, authenticate your account, and once you start your account, we then lead you through the series of steps to choose your anticipated start term, your program, and then the directions are kind of through there. But really, your application, you have to complete not only the forms, but in all cases, upload your resume, your CV, your essay, and name your letters of recommendation, people that will be serving as your recommenders. And to officially submit before your application is considered actionable on our part, you must push the submit button, and that includes paying the online application fee. The pieces that come later after you submit are obviously letters of recommendation and your official transcripts. Unlike many schools, and we'll go through this in a little more detail, we do not accept uploads of unofficial transcripts to your application. We do require the officials, but we'll get to that in a minute. I did want to also point out that for the deadlines piece, which we'll be getting to later, and requirements, the bottom of the screen, which we'll email out to everyone after we conclude the presentation, is our requirements and deadlines page. So I wanted to start with the resume and CV because I think from my experience, both as a student and both as someone who processes, reviews, sends to our faculty committees, resumes and CVs, everybody's like, well, it's pretty straightforward. It is, but for folks that are coming into the process, it's also just like you were applying for a position, for an employment, it's really good to kind of do a check-in on your resume and CV. And here are some of the areas that I find that more often than not we get questions about, things we ask you to kind of focus on. So, really focusing in on the territory, your education, clear and easy following, headers, basic bullet points, and certainly that they're proofed. I think it's one of the more overlooked pieces that our faculty committees really do look at. And I have put a resource at the bottom for you for resumes for any of you who are a little bit struggling on format. We don't ask that you overthink it, but that you really do kind of focus on, again, going back to what you will gain, what you will contribute, and your fit with the school, okay? The other kind of most overlooked territory, or one that's kind of is your personal statement. As I mentioned, academic ability, so your official transcript records are extremely important indicator of you. But one of the most kind of really examined parts across our programs is the personal statement or essay. This is your chance for self-reflection. This is your chance to kind of really talk about how you fit, and again, what you hope to gain from your degree and what you think you will contribute. I think one of the things I remind people, some people tend to either overthink this statement or this part of the application, or they undervalue it and they see it as more of a narrative about themselves. But you really have to determine your approach and style of the statement. Our faculty really do read these. They really do get it. That's how they get a sense of you before an interview process. And so really analyze, and one of the first steps, one of the things that I think everybody would think is pretty straightforward is make sure you're answering the essay prompt the way it's being asked. I think a lot of folks think it's more of a general statement. But if you go into the application and you read the part that says supplementary materials, you will see that they have very specific prompts for those questions. To be objective, to be, again, this is a reflection exercise and straightforward. This isn't an opportunity really for many on our master's level to be telling, just to be showing what you know about the field. It's really more straightforward, honest, be yourself exercise about what it is, what it means to you. And certainly the limit to the pages. Our faculty, depending on the program, will be reviewing upwards to 300, 400 applications in a cycle for our master's level programs. So they're looking for condensed writers who can really abbreviate to a point. And this is where I will stop. And one of our participants asked the question, am I allowed to write beyond 500 word limit for an essay? I understand I should try to adhere to the limit, but given the number of points, which I think are important to include, I would like basically to know if it's okay to turn in something that is a little bit longer. I would say use your judgment on this, no more than 2 pages. I will tell you that many of our faculty committees, if someone turning in kind of a 10-page personal statement is not going, is going to not count against you, but it shows that you've kind of followed the directions, that you're thoughtful, that you can give a brief and as condensed as possible. So this is not a hard and fast limit to our participant who has asked this question. It's a guideline. But we do ask that you consider that when you're writing that. And the last kind of piece of advice really is, really to review proof and consider getting a second reader. I always say when you're doing something as important as kind of submitting your application for graduate school, it's always a good idea to get a second opinion. Always somebody who has an objective opinion about what you're writing and that you're clear, again, on your fit with the program, fit with the school, shows that you know enough, you've done your research, and both what you hope to gain and what you're going to contribute to the curriculum, to the field of study, to the discipline. Content areas. Really, when you're focusing on your personal statement, very important to have a well-ordered statement that, your purpose, the area, your intended future use. And to address, this is also an opportunity for some of you, because we do require your undergraduate records. If you had inconsistencies in your academic transcript, such as a bad semester, or if you were an undergrad and you started off pre-med and decided that wasn't for you, there's opportunity there to explain your record a little more about you. And now I'm going to go into letters of recommendation. So who to approach, who to consider. Again, these are all guidance and advice, things that I've picked up over the years, and certainly Sienna and I have talked about both as graduate students in this position and as folks that work in the guidance side, evaluation, and the processing side, what to look for. So really follow the directions and the prompts in the online application about the types of recommendations you need to have. Typically, it's scholastic or professional performance. One of the most frequently asked questions I get is, I am a career changer. I've been out of undergrad for more than 15 years. I don't think any of the faculty that were teaching me in my bachelor's degree are still available. What should I do to gain an academic reference? You can certainly turn to your professional colleagues to supplement those instead of an academic resource. If you are just coming out of undergrad, then we strongly advise that you get an advisor, you get professors to speak to that, because they're your closest point of reference. So faculty members, administrators, internship, cooperative ed, and employers, certainly. Speak to your ability to critically reason, to write, verbal presentation, basically to be able to support work on the graduate level, which is going to require all of those skills: research skills, critical thinking, the ability to write well, reason. Those are just some of the laundry list of really appropriate skills, and are you ready for that? I always say, and you all know this, you're busy, many of you are professional working adults, approach your recommenders early. Give them 2 to 3 weeks, notice before you are at that stage. I would say that one of the kind of of things to avoid or pitfalls that a lot of folks have problems with is they've approached a recommender, and really out of consideration for them is A, are they willing to give you a strong and positive letter of recommendation? The second is, do they have the time to do it? And really giving, be wary of people who are reticent to do so. That usually means that they have reservations. Then, please ask them to tell you that straightforward so you can move on to find another recommender. I strongly recommend giving them kind of a requested deadline and to remind them of that deadline. Typically, for many of our students who are undergrads or getting academic references, or even adults who are finishing or in some kind of academic environment, depending on the time of year, if it's a faculty member, they're busier than not. So really identifying basically a timeline for them. I really need this by, and remind them in an email. And certainly in our online application checklist, you have the ability to see if they've submitted it or not. I also, once you've submitted their name and you fully submitted your application, would send them a quick reminder to say, hey, if you didn't receive the invitation from Johns Hopkins School of Education, I've submitted your name, you should have it by now. It kind of avoids the pitfall of people not receiving things, those kind of technology glitches that everyone has that, either went to their spam box. It's just a good idea to kind of do that, but in a non kind of nudging way. And then lastly, keep in the back of your mind a backup recommender in case one of your recommender falls through. We have had some cases where recommenders are out of the country or on sabbatical, or something happens and you need to replace, or you need to contact the Office of Admissions to let us know that, and then have somebody in mind that you feel would be, if your program only requires 2 letters of recommendation, have somebody in the back of your mind in case something happens. If your application requires 3, then also keep somebody in the back of your mind. Is always a good idea, just as an assurance. When you approach your recommenders, one of the key pieces I always say, and I know many people know this, but it does not hurt to remind you, it's always standard to send them a copy of your CV and resume, your goals, the type of program you're applying for, explaining, basically how they will be asked to submit your recommendation. So in our online application form, you're asked to put their name, email, their relationship to you, and their professional email address, so they know that they can be expecting an email from a third party. And then specify that they submit your letter with the professional or organizational, not a personal email. I think sometimes that, people don't really, sure, I'll provide you a letter of recommendation. It comes through a Gmail address. We do need to see their official professional organization address. But most importantly, to tell them your program. I can't tell you the number of applicants who come in the process and you can tell that their recommender didn't know what they were applying for. And they've either, they might be applying to multiple programs and the person has the wrong name of the school or the wrong name of the program. So it's really important. That does, unfortunately, even though that's not the applicant's error, it does reflect on your application when your recommender is not, is maybe doing one recommendation for you and not updating the school name. So we just like to make sure that you have all the information in front of them so that they can provide you the strongest recommendation possible. I do want to stop, and we have someone from our Master's in Education and Health Professions who asked, timing-wise, I've discussed the letters of recommendation with my supervisors and lightly nudged, now on the cusp of submitting. Is the ideal deadline the 15th of April for these letters, or is there additional leeway? So that's kind of a 2-part question, and I'm going to answer the first part, which is you've lightly nudged them, and I think giving them a deadline, I need these letters by, requested deadline by, and then certainly checking on your status page in the application. Once you've submitted, you need to first submit your application, and then providing someone actually with a firm deadline. I know it sounds a little pushy, but sometimes can help people really understand how to prioritize your request. We'll get to your second part, which is the ideal deadline, a little bit later when we do the deadline section. Okay. So moving on, I say 2 to 3 weeks, and by 2 to 3 weeks, you should have, yes, you can enter your recommender's name in there before you officially submit. really should start submitting your application. That's the key step, is getting every part of the application that you can control. So uploading your CV or resume, your personal statement, entering your recommenders, and then pushing submit. And then, as I mentioned, giving them a specific submission date and reminding them is the best you're going to be able, at this point to do. The other question I wanted to mention, because this is very common on graduate applications and needs to, I think, by the applicant, understand why the question is there. We do have in the form, when you enter your recommenders, I waive my right to see this letter of recommendation, and no, I do not waive my right. And I do get the occasional question from applicants basically saying, what does this mean really, and how might this affect my application? We encourage people to say, yes, I waive my right, and I'll tell you why. This means it really ensures that your recommender understands that whatever they're submitting for you is confidential. In other words, we cannot release it back to you. You can't, once you click waive my right, means that you do not have, or you waive your right to ever see that recommendation. And it gives them a more honest and fair representation, and tends to carry more weight with our faculty in terms of the admission selection process. I do encourage people to think very strongly about saying yes, because it definitely is an indicator to our faculty reviewing the applications that they're getting an honest representation of you. On to official transcripts. Official transcripts are, if you're familiar with the graduate application process, some schools do allow you to upload unofficials. We do not, as I had mentioned earlier. We only consider transcripts official if they are sent directly by the institution or through a service like the clearinghouse or Parchment, but they're requested through the institution and they come directly to us. We do not accept or consider official transcripts, things that you email us. Maybe you have an unofficial grade report. None of that we can accept directly from you. Applicants are required to, in the academic history portion of the online application, to list every institution on the post-secondary level, so everything post-high school that you've attended. This is a very confusing area for applicants because many people in undergraduate, sometimes in the graduate level, have taken a course at a community college or have maybe, just for professional development, completed something that gives them a transcript record for purposes not only for academic review, but also if you're going to be, let's say, applying for federal financial aid. All of those documents are required whether you earned a credential at that institution or not. And I think that what's confusing is a lot of applicants will say, well, I didn't think I needed to turn that in because it was listed on my primary degree transcript. Even if it was transferred into where you got your bachelor's degree, we still need to see an original transcript. So we ask you to keep in mind that will, if we get a transcript for you that has a school listed, 6 credits transferred from University of Y, then we have to stop the process and contact you and ask you to request that transcript. So it does cause delays. So we ask that you be cognizant of that during the process. For folks who've done study abroad, that's particular to your undergraduate records. Study abroad tends to have transferred the grade to your home institution. That we do not count as another institution. You've actually, it's still indicated on your degree granting transcript. So that's one of the more common questions we get. The other is for applicants, not only who are international and maybe reside international, and I know we have several of you joining us today, but for those of you who have attended or earned degrees outside the US or Canada, we consider many of you are familiar with this process, is your transcripts have to be evaluated by a US credential evaluation agency, and we primarily recommend World Education Services or ECE evaluators before they can be considered for admission. And we do that for 2 reasons. It's actually to the applicant's benefit, because we do not have certainly the expertise to fairly evaluate your undergraduate record. That means translating it from our semester system to the system of the country you went to. And it actually does, in the end, benefit the applicant for having a better understanding of that translated version. We treat the credential evaluation as your official transcript. So that is absolutely necessary and one of the most time-consuming processes for folks who have to request them. And so we'll, at the bottom here, Sion was nice enough to put a tip for me that as soon as you decide to apply, it's really important, as soon as the first step, even while you're filling out the application, if you know you're going to do it, is to request from your foreign institution, I mean, in other words, foreign meaning outside the United States or Canada, to send your transcripts and start that process. It can take 4 to 6 weeks for that to go from your home institution in the country you're coming from to the Ministry of Education to one of these evaluators. And the evaluators actually only take about 7 to 10 days, but all of that time is the en route transcript. And so we strongly advise folks in that position to really look at applying out, leaving 4 to 5 months time to do that. Applicants are, strongly encouraged immediately to open an account, to talk to these evaluators, and then they will tell you specifically what they need. Once they're done with their evaluation, once they have all the materials from you and they've done all their checks, both of these agencies send them directly to us. So, it's just getting set up and getting in that process is extremely important. And again, kind of as we approach that, official transcripts are, yes, a very big part of your application. I do want to stress in the points that we covered earlier, not to underestimate the value of things like the personal statement, statement of purpose, and certainly your resume is also being critical things that are being evaluated. They really do look at your application holistically. It's not just transcripts. We're going to move on to application deadlines, and that seems to be the biggest sticking point. And I have my colleagues here, with the School of Education, we have 36 programs and 9 different application dates across those programs. And so we don't make it very, we acknowledge that there can be some confusion around some of our application categories. So we hope this is useful for those of you who have sent in advance or will have questions about that. The types of application deadlines we have, and this is the biggest one, I'm going to start with priority consideration. For many of our programs that you're applying to, many of the folks that I see in here that are counseling, who might be gifted ed, we have a listed priority consideration deadlines, and you'll see April 1st all over our website. And a lot of folks are saying, I don't know if I'm going to make that deadline. What does that mean? Priority means that basically if you have your application is completed, and so when we talk about deadlines, when I say a deadline, I mean that it's the point of completion of your application, not the point at which you've just started the application form. This is really, you've submitted your application form, your letters of rec have come in. When we're looking to those dates, it means that our departments and committees will be giving you full consideration for admission at that point. So applications receive priority when they're met by the priority deadline. Applications received, we absolutely accept applications for those programs after that. We have regular deadlines or regular rolling deadlines after that. It's not, but they're based on space availability. So if, let's say, you are waiting on something like you have international transcripts that are being evaluated. We had one question here, but your evaluation is not going to be completed till after the April 1st. Will you still be considered? Absolutely, you will be. However, the folks that got their applications completed and submitted by April 1 are going to go first. So by no means does it mean that you are cut off from the process. It just means it's a roundup point for applicants to be considered in what we call the first major round. Fixed deadlines means if you see a fixed deadline, and that is really, one date, so you see July 1 or you see April 15th or, fixed deadlines, wherever you see the word without priority in front of it means that that is considered a hard deadline. Now, if you are in the position and you're working towards a deadline for one of our programs that's fixed, we encourage you to write us if there's going to be a delay that's beyond your control. We will try to work with you and work with the academic department. Rolling admissions deadlines means that we are accepting applications and they will be reviewed in the order that they are received up until the program either reaches capacity or till usually about 2 weeks before the start of the term. And the reason why we cut it off about 2 weeks is so it gives folks time who have been admitted to onboard, apply for financial aid, do all the things they need to do to get a successful start. And then probably our rounds, some of our programs basically have several points where phases and several mini due dates throughout the semester, but I don't think anyone here that I can see who's joining us today is in one of those programs. The majority of questions that we're getting is priority consideration. And so, for instance, the Master's in Health Profession question, that's April 15th for that program is a priority deadline. It's just, it really is what it means. So, you know, if you want to be given, if you're full consideration or on the early wave of review, then get it in by then. If you can't, that does not mean your application is void. I strongly encourage folks to look at our admissions deadlines and requirements page for your specific program, and we can certainly try to answer additional questions in the chat as we move along here. Okay, one of the pieces I think that is kind of a mystery to most applicants and the least disclosed part of the process for is what happens after I complete my application, okay? I've made the deadline or priority consideration deadline, or I'm complete, now what happens? First, once you're complete, you will get a notification from us in the form of an email, and we ask you really to check your emails to say your application's complete. We will contact you if there's an issue with your application. So we'll go through the phases. First, it's screened by our office, then it goes through a process that I'll share with you. So you have a little kind of glean and an insight of how long, who it goes to, and how decisions are made. The first step is really our screening, and then we look to make sure your application is truly complete. If there's any questions that we have, our admissions processing coordinator will reach out to you to ask that question. The first pass is sent to the graduate programs, where the lead of that program area or department will do an initial review of your application. And then in third step would be batch review, where within some of our larger programs that they will send an application, or they'll split the applications up for 2 or 3 readers on the faculty committee to do that. The fourth step is many, not all, but many of our, particularly our face-to-face programs, will require some kind of interview with you after. If you've gone through first, second, and third screening, they will reach out to you directly to set up or schedule either a phone, a web conference, Skype, Zoom, or an in-person application interview, admissions interview. And most of those interviews for the face-to-face programs can be anywhere from half day, full day. They range all over the board, but it means that you've been selected for that fourth phase. And then a final step where they come together as a committee, they gather the evaluations, and they recommend the admissions decisions. And by basically recommend means decide. And then we process those decisions and send out your notifications to you, whether it be an offer of admission, denial, we hope not, whatever. And then all this kind of takes place. The average time, this is not a set for every single program, is 4 to 6 weeks to do that. Some of our committees review faster than others. It depends on the size of the applicant pool. So I will tell you right now, if you're applying to a counseling program, the wait is a little bit longer because we have huge amount of applications. To our doctoral programs, a very sizable amount of applications that are reviewed by committee. So it does vary, but we give you that approximate time frame so that you know what to expect. And certainly in that period of time, there are some things that you can be doing to help, during that kind of waiting initial period. So as I mentioned, if you are requested to come to an interview, you will receive an email, phone call directly from that academic department. That does not come through admissions. And it's usually after phase 2 when you've had a preliminary review, they've screened your application, you've been moved forward. If you don't receive one, you may receive a communication from us, but kind of with a final decision if you're not selected for that round. So all of the information for format, date are provided by the department. They really view those as a requirement of the admissions process, so it's not something that's optional and shouldn't be treated as such if you do get a notification. Some of our online programs, if you're applying for a fully online program, do not do that, but they may reach out to you to ask you questions for clarification on your application. So what are our selection committees looking for in the interview process? It really depends on your discipline, but overall they're looking for communication skills, motivation, maturity, disposition for the profession or field. If you're interested in becoming a teacher, they want to know that you're there for the right reasons. If you're interested in counselor education, they want to view you in behavioral group dynamics. They're looking for intellectual potential. And again, going back to what I had originally said, you know, are you a good fit for this program with your career goals and objectives, and demonstrations of reasons why you wanted to apply. So it really is a confirmation of final decision, and one I think that's very valuable for both the candidate and for the faculty to get to know you. And then I think one of our questions was, when will I hear? And I kind of mentioned the whole process for review can take 4 to 6 weeks after the application deadline for most of our master's or graduate programs. Again, almost immediately after they conclude interview rounds, decisions are passed down to our office. So shortly after interviews, they try to make those, they make their final decisions, and they want to certainly give you the notifications as soon as possible. And we certainly ask for that in the admissions office. So how do we notify you of a decision? All applicants are notified through our online admission system. You will receive a notification first in an email that will invite you to go in and open up your official letter of notification. And if you are offered admission, additional instructions on how to accept that offer will be provided to you, in addition to a new student checklist if you choose to move forward and accept that. So all that is included in your offer letter. Scholarships, financial aid are all handled through separate communications. So if you've applied for those separately, those would be coming through different offices. This would be strictly the notification. And now I just wanted to move to the Q&A, but I have a few questions that were sent in. Looks like I've answered some of them. It looks like I have a school counseling participant who asked if the GRE is required for admission to this program. No, it is not. I have a question from someone for a graduate certificate in mind-brain teaching. Can I furlough 1 year if accepted? I think you mean defer your admission. Select programs do allow deferral. If on our webpage we have an admitted student section, which gives you instructions on how to request a deferral. And I think I have a question from a gifted education applicant about waiting for your international credential evaluation, but I may not make it by April 1st. Will my priority consideration be revoked? No, it won't. It may mean that you go into the regular decision review, but again, you're not certainly, you're well within guidelines to do that. I certainly wouldn't stress about that. I would say that, for many applicants who are in the international kind of credential evaluation services, and sometimes it takes more time, we are aware of that. We do let our committees know that if things are delayed. And then I think we have a few more questions. I think this was from one of our MEHP. I'm not sure if this is beyond the scope of this session, but where do international students tend to become unstuck? I would need a little more clarification for that question, but if you're talking about the application process, I think, again, the biggest hurdle is getting your evaluation through the evaluators and to Johns Hopkins to complete your application. Tends to be the biggest one that I see. And two more that are kind of more in classroom time that may be more specific, and we can talk to you a little bit more offline. You are an undergraduate online learner who is now looking to take a face-to-face graduate program, and you're concerned about switching formats. I would say that we probably should dialogue offline, but the class formats do vary by program. For school counseling, it's usually about 2 hours and 45 minutes per class, and then you have your work outside of class. So yes, it's a commitment face-to-face, but as I say, for our online programs versus our face-to-face here, they have the same rigor, the same amount of time and preparation required. It's really the lectures that are going to be, I think, being time and place are going to be a little bit different for you. And then I can answer anything else specific offline. Sion's now going to queue up some of the questions I may have missed. And again, I invite you to challenge us with questions that you have. So hopefully we will be able to get to everyone's questions within the time frame. So Sion, would you like to read those for me?
Sure. So we have a question from Michelle. The first question is, the mental health counseling program recently changed their personal statement from a 500-word essay to a series of questions that they would like answered. Should I approach the new statement as question and answer, or an essay that addresses all those questions?
I think two-part. One is probably in a well-ordered essay, you're going to need to, rather than doing question, answer, address those questions and make sure there's good transition between the questions that they're answering. So it really should be kind of answered more of a continuous essay than a question, answer. And to the best that you can, kind of blend your paragraphs so that you're isolating the direct statement question, what they're asking, if that makes sense.
And then a follow-up question from Michelle again is, how long do referees have to submit their letters of recommendation after I submit my application?
Well, in order to submit your application fully, you have to put their name and professional email address in it. And once you click basically that you've saved that, an invitation goes out to them right away to notify them that you've requested it. Now, of course, as I had mentioned, you've had a pre-conversation with them. You provided them a resume, CV, your goals, the type of program that you're applying to. So you have all that before you've even put their name down in the application form. But that's where I highly advise that when you're requesting this, you say to them, I need it by such and such a date. It really does provide people a point to which they do that. I provide actually to many of the folks that I worked with letters of recommendation. And I always say, just really be clear with me about what deadline you need this by. I need your CV, I need this. And that helps me prioritize when I'm going to be doing them. So from the recommender end, clarity is good. I mean, certainly you've had that conversation asking for their willingness to be your recommender. You've said, is this a good time for you to do that? You've been considerate. And most will say, I'm sorry, I don't think I can do this, or should. And you should kind of look for those signals. But yeah, do give them a work, give them a deadline. I've just submitted my app. I'm done with it. I really need it by X date.
All right, so the next question, Adeline Ho, may I know whether I can go ahead to submit my application when I have all my documentation ready except for accreditation report from Wes? The master, which I'm applying, has a rolling admission and priority admission deadline in April. Will I be able to apply after 1st of April and be registered for fall admissions?
Absolutely. Adeline, that's a great question. Your WES International Credential Evaluation comes after you submit your application. So I would encourage you to finish that application, submit it, and then when your WES evaluation becomes ready, they'll send it to us and that will populate your checklist. So just so we're clear, the transcripts and letters of rec are applied to your record, particularly transcripts. It's helpful that you've submitted your application because we have your name to match to that transcript or evaluation. But yes, please don't wait until you think you have your evaluation ready. Please go ahead and submit that application. You absolutely will be able to have your application reviewed. Our fall registration does not open up until June. So no one registers for classes till June. So there should be plenty of time for you to do that.
All right, so next question, Megan Brown. In the employment section of the application, should I include internships as well as paid jobs?
That's a great question, Megan. If you, for instance, haven't had formal employment experience, but you have been an intern, depending on where you are in your phase of your career, absolutely you can include that. I think that internships are a form of service, they're a form of work. So yes, you can absolutely do that. In the slide deck that I presented to you, I do have some links, and Sienna and I can follow up with some really good resources from both other schools and thought articles about different ways things you can highlight in your resume to help you stand out as a candidate.
And then Megan also asked, what format would you like the essay personal statement to be?
Obviously, all of them really should be in a typed Word document, and I would follow the prompt and the instructions for those. As I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, someone said, can I go a little bit over? Yes, you can go a little bit over. Nobody's word counting your personal statement or essay. I wouldn't make it, I certainly wouldn't exceed 2 to 3 pages in doing so, but yes, it should be a standard font, easy to read, Word document, and that's pretty much the format I would do that. It is a narrative, so it should read like an essay, as we had mentioned. I wouldn't, if someone has questions in there, I wouldn't do question, answer. I would try to merge those into one.
Mm-hmm. And we have a question from Ms. D. I am an international student who is living in the United States. Do I need to follow the priority date for the application?
If you are an international student who's studying here and on a student visa, then we do encourage you to do that, to get your application in by the priority date, especially if you're looking for a transfer of your student visa to Johns Hopkins if you're admitted. That being said, if you're having an issue, reach out to us. We'll try to talk you through, if you're getting a credential evaluation. For many of our international students who are studying here at the baccalaureate level, who are looking to stay and go into master's programs, it is a good idea for you to kind of map out, we can transfer your student visa once you're admitted to a program, but we do have a dedicated office on the university campus that deals, basically is the official organization within Johns Hopkins that manages all of the visas. If you are a permanent resident, and you just happen to have attended internationally, then you're treated like a domestic applicant, if that makes sense. But if you have questions specific to looking ahead about your application, the reason why we strongly encourage international applicants, especially those that are residing outside the country, is it does take time if you're offered admission to process your I-20, your visa, to provide resources and help you get set up with living arrangements, all kinds of things. So that's it's a longer process than, let's say, someone who's domestic. So that's why we strongly encourage that.
Our next question, my program of interest is clinical mental health counseling. The School of Education at Hopkins is the first school that I feel really wants a true personal statement. All of the other graduate programs I've researched want a personal statement that speaks on what their program has to offer. So my question is, how personal should we get? Should we include what the program has to offer that will benefit us, or stick exactly to the prompt?
I think that is, an essay to me and to our evaluators is a little bit about you. It's not as much about what you know about the program. You do need to keep in mind, it's not that you don't realize this, but I like to remind people, because I think sometimes we tend to what I call scope creep when we're writing an essay. Our mind is spinning. We're thinking about the various ways we should answer this to look as an attractive candidate. Our faculty evaluators know their program. They know the requirements. They know the coursework. They know all that. Going back to the original question or the original statement, it's what you hope to gain. Do you have a basic knowledge of what you're hoping to do with this degree and what you think you can contribute in terms of your background? So your narrative focus, A, yes, read the prompt and answer it. The B, where you can, why you think what you think you can contribute. So if you're in clinical mental health, not necessarily what led you from day one up to that point, what do you think you can contribute? What do you want to learn more about? How do you think, how you will fit with that in terms of your long-term goal objectives? And so for anyone in a counselor education or teacher preparation, something that is leading to licensure, you obviously have looked at web resources about what that means, the different types of counseling that you have an idea of where you want to go. And that goes back to the research and planning when you're looking at degrees. So not really about what you know about the program as much of how you're going to fit. Is it a good fit for you? Why it's a good fit? And both what you hope to gain and contribute.
Okay. Jennifer is asking, for the master's in school counseling, how many recommendations are required?
Should be 2 across the board. So just to keep in mind, for school counseling, we have a flex program, and by flex we mean you can go part-time or full-time. You can choose by your semesters. We also have something called the fellows program, which is an accelerated 15-month program that is absolutely full-time. In other words, you can't work, can't hold a job during that starts in summer and goes all the way to the following summer. So it's 15 months since it's very accelerated. So depending on which school counseling format you're looking at, all of them have reduced their requirements to 2 letters of recommendation.
Next question, may I know whether Wes will send the transcripts to the admissions office, or do I need to ask my institutions to send to the school too?
That's a great question. Wes, once they are finished with your evaluation, when you set up your account with them, they ask you to basically check off that you would like this sent to Johns Hopkins School of Education. As soon as your credential evaluation is complete, they electronically transmit that to us. You do not need to send a separate translated transcript to us. We consider that your official transcript.
Jessica asks, what about credits transferred from high school AP courses?
Typically, we do not request you to get a transcript from AP. AP Advanced Placement is considered a category of testing, so it's not considered an actual separate institution.
All right, Sandra asks, I am applying to the Individualized Interdisciplinary Program. I believe both of my recommenders have already submitted their letters. I am not sure whether they submitted these using their professional emails, though I provided these emails when prompted on the application. If they did not, should they resubmit? Is that possible?
That's a great question, Sandra. We will contact you if there's a question. You do not need to worry about that. You know, if for some reason something looks, and that's part of what I should clarify for you. If it's suspect, and you know, typically they're asked to include their information in there, our coordinator will reach out to you and say this was not submitted. In some cases, I had a applicant last week who approached me and said, you know, one of my recommenders works for a government agency and is not permitted to use their professional organization address. And I said, okay. And we made arrangements to make sure we didn't flag that person. We knew where it was coming from, and they provided additional context. So no, you do not need to ask them to resubmit. Absolutely not. We will reach out to you and or them if we have a question.
Jessica asks, how can someone without a related academic or professional background demonstrate commitment to the field?
Okay, so again, it depends on the field that you're going into, because you have to keep in mind, from my perspective, we have some, you know, if you're a teacher preparation degree and you need a content background to qualify for that particular program, I'm going to answer that differently. But let me just read the question real quickly again. I think the demonstration in that case, if you're coming from you're a career changer, and let's say you've worked in, I don't know, a healthcare organization, and you've been an administrator for 20 years, I'm just giving and you're looking to go into clinical mental health. You know a little bit about the field, where you want to go, what you want to do with it, and that not necessarily that you have all the appropriate steps, because if you read our academic program page for that, they do not require you have a straight undergraduate in psychology. They don't have a lot of prerequisite background there. So it's you've researched the field, you know what you want to do with it, how you are prepared to address that, and again, back to the question, what you will gain and what you're going to contribute to that. A little bit about you and your background and what led you there.
All right, these are some really good questions. So the next one is, I'm currently doing my master's in clinical psychology at University of London in the UK. I want to know if this degree would count towards a CAGS certificate in counseling.
It's a great question. So here's the piece, is you will have to, you're advised to get that international credential evaluation because you're outside the United States. Both the certificate in advanced graduate study and our postmasters in clinical mental health are designed for professionals that have a background in that field, have a master's degree, are working in that field to do continuing education. But our faculty committees, and we have one faculty member who works very closely with applicants, likes to talk to you about what it is you're trying to achieve with that. So what I would recommend you do is you can contact our office. We can certainly try to set something up for you to talk to them if you have some questions, because those are very custom designed programs at that level. Those are above the master's, they're postmaster's level programs. And so they want to be very clear with you about what you're hoping to achieve and that we have the right coursework for you to achieve that goal. So we're going to have to ask you to reach out to us and we'll try to make that connection for you.
So the next one we have is Dominique Jones. How critical is GPA if you obtained your undergraduate degrees many years ago and are now pursuing an MAT alongside a certification program?
Okay, so I'm sensing from that you obviously have your bachelor's degree, but you've earned a second degree, but you're concerned about your GPA on the undergraduate level, is what I get from that question. I would say that GPA is important, particular depending on if you're secondary or elementary. Elementary is more of a generalist, but for secondary, your content area is important. I would need to know a little bit more about that question to be able to answer that really clearly for you. And we'll be happy to do so. Usually GPAs, the folks that come to me that say, hey, listen, I don't have a stellar GPA in my first 2 years of undergraduate. How is this going to affect me? You know, it can go one of two ways. If you are a teacher in a teacher preparation program and you want to be a social studies teacher and all the content courses you took there were not passing grades, yeah, that's going to affect you. But it's one of these questions we really have to look on a case-by-case basis.
Chantel Collins is asking, what is a typical acceptance rate for the counseling master's program?
The most recent rate for fall of 2018 was at, I think, 62%. And that's a sizable application pool.
Stephanie Williams, I believe the Master's in Clinical Mental Health Counseling Spring 2020 deadline is November 1st. Is this the priority date?
Yes, and when November 1st, we're talking about for spring 2020, not fall 2020. So we have priority consideration dates for both spring and fall for those programs.
So the next one from Nakima first. If my GPA from the 1980s is below required level, will the School of Education be able to take my years of teaching and other positives into account?
I will tell you that they do look at, again, you're holistically at your resume at these other paces. It does depend on how far below we're talking about. So I would need to know a little bit more about your case and how to best direct you. But to answer that question, you know, if you have subsequently have additional earned credits since then, there's a number of factors that will go into that. But no, I don't think that should deter you from putting forward an application.
Simone asked, how many, if any, graduates or credits do the master's counseling programs accept for transfer?
Across the School of Education, the policy is 2 graduate courses. So 6 credits is the maximum that you can transfer into one of our programs. And just to keep in mind, our faculty will not look at transfer credits until you've submitted an application, been offered admission to the program.
Right, so it looks like we are running out of time. We have a couple more minutes and we're going to continue reading the questions. Next one is from William. I am an incoming TFA core member. Am I still able to apply to the Master of Science in Education, Educational Studies?
Okay, so if you're an incoming core member, William, your defined degree is the MS in Educational Studies, and that is either elementary, early childhood, or secondary, and I think you've listed another program and in conjunction with that. The individualized interdisciplinary option is not available as someone who is going into our TFA affiliated program at this point. We'd be happy to answer any questions about that afterwards.
Chantel, do you offer an application fee waiver?
Chantel, we do offer that for certain service organizations. In other words, if you're a McNair Scholar, Peace Corps member, but very few. The $80 application for both master's and grad cert is a standard, and that is a school policy. So overall, no, unless you're part of those two organizations at this point, we do not.
It looks like the next question is a clarification question. So to clarify, for the Master of Science in Education, Educational Studies, Independent Schools option, the average wait time to hear is 4 to 6 weeks after the application is submitted, or 4 to 6 weeks after the priority deadline.
Typically, it depends on the program. Because independent schools is a smaller review committee, I will tell you that they will tend to get faster than the 4 to 6 weeks. For our larger programs that are evaluating many applications in a batch, like counseling, it's definitely going to take 4 to 6 weeks. So typically when your application's complete, they will forward that. So no, you know, if you have it in well completed before the April 1st, for that particular program is a smaller committee, they tend to move a little faster. And that's what I think is unclear, is that the majority of our programs, it depends on the size of the application pool for that program, on how quickly, how large, and the type of process that they have for review. So it can be very individualized by program.
Elise is asking, Master of Science in Education and Interdisciplinary Studies, could you please comment on how to discuss the strengths and weaknesses in your academic background as part of the essay?
I think the best way to do that is just to be very straightforward about just succinct and saying, my undergraduate or my previous academic record does not reflect where I feel I am today and why. And just be very straightforward and honest, but think about how you want to position that. It can be a real changer for someone who is in a competitive pool to say, this is what I have since done. This isn't reflective of where I am at now or what I've done since. And I think that's the best advice I can give you at that point.
All right, the next question, can the courses in the Mind, Brain, and teaching program be transferred into the EDD program?
No, they cannot. So there are special considerations. If you're looking at the grad cert as a preparation for the EDD program, you cannot really take the same specialization in the EDD. They have kind of a special process for people who've done that, who are interested in that field. But you are advised in the EDD committee, if they see you've taken the Mind, Brain Teaching coursework, about a specialization, a different specialization.
So next question is, I am interested in the EDD program. I already hold 2 masters. What is the difference in the application process?
The EDD program has a fixed deadline and has a shorter admission cycle. So they open their admission application in July. Right now it's closed. They will open it in July and they will accept until early January. And then they have a definite time frame when they get back to their admitted candidate. All of their candidates are notified by a certain date. That they also have a different committee structure. So they have over 30 faculty by specialization reviewing applicants. So it's a much more kind of intensive evaluation process on that part. The other piece is that they do not require a personal interview for the EDD program. There's actually a video interview required. So those are the major differences in that process.
All right, so her question is, do I need to apply to one program, Flex or Accelerated, or can I choose that once, accepted? This is for the MAT program.
Those programs are very, the difference between Flex and Accelerated is Accelerated starts in the summer. So I would definitely do some discernment about whether that's a full-time program. It's 12 months, it's super intensive. So if you decided for, let's say, to mark Flex, which is more part-time, full-time as you go, and you want to switch to Accelerated, the concern there would be you're not, truly accelerated. They can work with you on that. But I would really think about which option is going to suit you. If you work full-time, if you have a family, you might have to do Flex. And they'll work with you to increase your course load in the semester, but the Accelerated is very defined. It's very fast.
Jessica asks, can prospective applicants sit on a class and be connected with a current student for a discussion on their experience in the program?
I'm going to turn that over to Sion, who's the head of our Student Ambassador Program. She can answer that.
Absolutely. Again, depending on which program that you are interested in, feel free to send us an email. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to chat in the email address for the Office of Admissions. Feel free to email us, let us know which program you're interested in, and we are more than happy to connect you with a current student of the program that you are interested in.
Okay.
All right, so we're actually going to take about maybe 2 more questions. I know that there are so many other questions that you guys asked. We promise that we will email you individually and answer your questions. So I'm going to go to the next person that I'm going to go to is, the question is, I earned my bachelor's degree in the US in December 2014. I am applying to a program starting fall 2019. I am wondering if I am qualified to waive the TOEFL test.
You are qualified if you've earned a 4-year bachelor's degree in the United States. You should fill out the waiver. The waiver form, for those of you who are not native speaker of English, is if you fit in that category. So if you've earned your 4-year degree, you would fill out the waiver form, and the waiver form is then approved after your interview or during your interview by the faculty committee.
And for the William asked for the MEHP program, am I correct in understanding applicants must hold a graduated degree to be considered?
The MEHP program is a very defined niche program for medical and clinical professionals. So most of I would say the successful accepted candidates to that program are physicians, dentists, nurse educators, so already have advanced degrees in that field. That program is not, that's for someone who has a really strong clinical background. It is not really what I would consider, you do have to have specific criteria to meet that. So yes, you need to have an advanced degree.
All right, so we actually are now out of time. Thank you so much for your time and joining us. Like I mentioned, we will make sure to email everyone one-on-one and just and answering your questions. And also one more thing, we are taking attendance. So for those who do not have the first and last name, please share it in the chat box. That would be great. Thank you so much, and thank you for your time and your interest in Johns Hopkins School of Education.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.